OK, British politics. Boris Johnson recognises that negotiating a new trade deal with America after Brexit will be, as he put it today, a tough old haggle. But the warm words of support from Donald Trump's national security advisor suggest that the US president is keen to give the new British Prime Minister a political win with some sort of early trade deal.
Yeah, they might reach agreement sector by sector, starting with manufacturing. It certainly isn't going to resolve the trickier issues concerning, for example, US pharmaceuticals and US animal products. And however big this whole deal, it's still going to be just a fraction of the size of Britain's current trading relationship with the EU. Here are the figures for you. In 2016, the UK exported $120 billion worth of goods and services to the US. But more than double that, $283 billion worth to the EU, which is perhaps why today Mr. Johnson was also very keen to show he is not abandoning European markets.
There are all sorts of opportunities we have to open up trade with the US, but that also goes for countries around the world. But, well, you're right, the single biggest deal that we need to do is a free trade agreement with our friends and partners over the Channel.
Joining us now from Geneva is Dmitry Grozoubinski, who's a former World Trade Organization negotiator who founded ExplainTrade.com, sounding very useful website, I should say, which focuses on the nitty-gritty of trade deals. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. And I just wonder, we've heard over the course of today through John Bolton in particular here in London. He's been speaking to the Trade Secretary, to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, to all senior ministers, offering a whole panoply of possibilities of the way in which deals might be done. There could be temporary deals covering everything. They could be sector by sector. I mean, is it as simple as that?
Well, the lovely thing is about not being the one to actually negotiate any of these things is that you can speak in these broad hypotheticals and talk about potential sunlit uplands. Fundamentally, US trade deals are negotiated by the Office of US Trade Representative, and they have one priority, which is to get a deal that Congress will adopt. I think the general consensus among people watching this is that trying to bring a mini sectoral to the US Congress right now would be a very high uphill climb, even setting aside the issues over the Good Friday Agreement and the concerns some Democrats in Congress have about that.
And Dmitry, how likely is it that those trade negotiators who are not John Bolton are going to be able to overcome British concerns about US animal welfare regulations and US pharmaceuticals flooding the National Health Service?
Well, if you're a US negotiator and you're looking at the UK right now, you're thinking this is probably the best chance you will ever have to make that push and to overcome that kind of objection. The UK government will probably never be in a position where it politically needs a quick announced deal with the US more than it does immediately following Brexit, if no deal happens. And so it's going to be under tremendous pressure to accept US demands. And as time goes on, that pressure will likely fade as kind of the heat of Brexit subsides a little.
I mean, obviously it's complicated. I saw Boris Johnson also said they still ban haggis, for heaven's sake, in the United States. That's probably the least of his problems. But there was a suggestion also, and I take your point about John Bolton not being the man who will do any of this dealing, but he said this will not be a quid pro quo sort of issue. We don't have to get guarantees from the UK over Huawei or Iran or other big issues to get something back. Do you buy that?
Well, I think firstly, it contradicts a lot of the messages that are coming from inside the negotiations and what's been reported. But beyond that, maybe on cars, he is willing to do a deal without any quid pro quo. But that's because the US tariff on cars is 2.5%. They can drop that tomorrow without really any sweat off their back. And they'd really rather like the UK to drop its 10% tariff on cars in return. So when you talk about sectoral issues and you allow the US to cherry pick them that way, perhaps there are issues they're willing to look in a slightly more decoupled way. But as soon as you start asking the US to make real sacrifices in areas of policy that it doesn't want to move on, you run into trouble. And I also would think that any deal you bring to Congress that doesn't contain some gains for US farmers, meaningful gains, is going to be in real trouble. Farmers are already feeling like they're the ones who have been dragged to the front line of the US trade war with China. And frankly, I don't think they're going to walk away from this without expecting some market access into the UK that makes a difference for them.
Good point.
Okay, Dmitry Grozoubinski, thank you very much for joining us. Dmitry, I want you to come back on the programme because I know that we're going to be talking about this issue for a while as that trade negotiation deal is actually done and after Brexit, so we need somebody who can explain it step by step what's happening. Dmitry mentioned one other thing there, and that is the Good Friday Agreement. I've spoken to Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. She has made it very clear that any deal that jeopardizes, or any Brexit deal that might jeopardize the Good Friday Agreement, they will not get a US-UK trade negotiation through Congress. And in the end, as Dmitry said, it's Congress that's going to have to sign off on this.